Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Operations Analytics, Identify Mainframe Consumption and Utilization for Cost Optimization, brought to you by RSD. My name is Casey Smith, and on behalf of Share Headquarters, I would like to thank you for joining us today. Share is pleased to continue our webinar programming with this informative and educational event. Please note that presentation slides and the recording will be available post-webinar at share.org. Today's presenters are Craig Hilburn and Mark Perillo, Technical Account Managers at RSD. We encourage you to submit questions throughout the event via the Q&A box on your webinar toolbar. These will be addressed at the end of the presentation. I would like to now turn the webinar over to today's presenter. Please go ahead, Craig.
Thank you, Casey. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our discussion and demo of Ztrim Operations Analytics. And I'd also like to thank the Share Association for providing this opportunity for us to meet and present this solution. Our focus in this session is mainframe performance analysis, trends, and tools, as cost optimization and digital transformations remain a high priority for businesses and therefore IT stakeholders. We will also demonstrate the capabilities of Ztrim Operations Analytics. I'd also like to introduce my cohort, Mark Perillo, Technical Account Manager, and he'll be doing the product demo when we get to that portion.
Greetings.
Hey. So Ztrim Operations Analytics from RSD is the result of a 2-year collaboration with a community of mainframe performance experts. These experts primarily consult with major banks and insurance companies around the world where we have presence with our customer base. Today's agenda, we will talk about mainframe modernization and optimization. We'll provide an overview of mainframe performance analysis and some of the trends and tools in that space. We'll look at Ztrim Operations Analytics from RSD, and then we'll also get to the live demo of the product. So all businesses are facing several challenges associated with mainframe modernization and optimization. Businesses are more and more focused on digital transformation or modernization initiatives. And these strategies create pressure to find funding for platform modernization and optimization. Oftentimes, leaders look to savings from current processes and current platforms to fund these processes and enable these initiatives. You'll notice as we're indicated on the slide, I have this term legacy systems highlighted and bolded. It's kind of an interesting term that we've gotten used to and we often throw around in IT, but it's interesting that, really there's not been a new platform introduced in probably the last 15, 20 years. So in reality, all platforms today are in the legacy category. But what is interesting is that on the mainframe, over 70% of critical corporate data is processed and held on those platforms. The challenges are that it is often difficult to access. There's little visibility and insight into what's the processing that's going on the mainframe. And it's viewed oftentimes as a kind of a black box. And it's managed oftentimes in a more reactive mode rather than proactive and integrated closely with business processes. As IT professionals, we wrestle with some conflicting wants and needs from stakeholders and some inefficiencies as well. It's a balancing act. Stakeholders need visibility into the mainframe for decision making, and businesses require access to real-time and understandable data. And at the same time, we understand from various surveys that we've conducted with our customers that as much as 15% of systems costs are held and processed by non-critical business applications. So it's kind of an interesting efficiency and challenge. And then there are significant delays for information. To be able to find basic information as input into decision-making processes, where it be modernization or optimization or platform for purpose. And then there are challenges associated with the various solutions that are available. Current market solution challenges, they contribute to MSU actually adding to MLC cost. And we all know and understand that MLC cost is the focus of these initiatives. And then they're also add to the complexity, and many solutions, just because of the nature of the way they go together, there is additional expense associated with them, whether it be that they are based on consumption metrics or based on total volume processed. There's various models that are used. And you can see across this market and this space that there are just various challenges associated with some of the solutions that are in place. What RSD sought to do with Ztrim Operations Analytics while working with these experts is to come up with a solution that allowed easy creation of dashboards, was very interactive and easy to use, included a set of standard and common KPIs already integrated into the tool, and then we also focused on the value as far as cost and benefit. I'd like to talk about a little bit more about RSD Ztrim Operations Analytics. Organizations that are currently using Ztrim are reflected in these verticals right now. In the U.S., it's insurance, financial institutions, and state agencies. And in Europe, along working with some of the partners that we already had in place, we're seeing organizations, especially banking, that is benefiting from Ztrim Operation Analytics. The outcomes that we can expect with Ztrim Operations Analytics is we're making a pretty bold statement here, a 300% return on investment, so 300% ROI with the tool. And our model today is that we can do a product demo, which we will show you today. It's a demo of anonymized data, but our model is to show you that demo and then ask for the next step for you to provide us a sampling of your SMF records, and we can show you a demo also using your data, and we can do that very quickly and turn that around. And then the implementation, we'll talk about the implementation of Ztrim Operations Analytics and the ease of implementation and what that looks like. And we are offering Ztrim Operation Analytics as a yearly subscription per CPC. And we can talk about that a little bit more as well. Now we'll turn our focus to mainframe performance analysis as kind of a genre of solutions. Webster defines analytics as information resulting from the systematic analysis of data. Ztrim Operations Analytics is an information and communication tool enabling stakeholders across the enterprise to easily visualize mainframe consumption from a system, workload, application, or program perspective. How could your organization benefit from having this information for all stakeholders? Could it be that you could more easily control system cost, reduce MLC cost, maintain compliance with license agreements to prevent unexpected costs from vendor audits, or expose opportunities for efficiencies and optimization as businesses drive for digital transformation? Let's look a little bit at some mainframe trends. These are some things that we're all aware of and that we kind of live every day. If you're involved in IT, you've had these discussions. So non-critical applications are being transferred from the mainframe to distributed platforms. There are hybrid environments that are more and more common, and many organizations are looking for that model and looking to see what advantages and value that model might bring them. Mainframe environments are being consolidated and often outsourced. This creates additional factors and pressures as far as expanding scopes of responsibility. And outsourcing is always something that is a challenge when you're trying to address organizational change. And then we all understand that resource constraints are an issue. Skilled mainframe personnel are retiring without skilled replacements available. Perhaps this will change as groups like SHARE create programs such as mentoring and training. I was excited at SHARE St. Louis to see some of the programs that were in place. And actually, we were able to meet with some of the students that were participated in SHARE and got to visit with them and what they're learning and what they're being exposed to. So it's actually very exciting what SHARE is doing in that space. A key question becomes what information about systems is available as organizations strive to make these basic strategic decisions. These are not just IT decisions, but they are business decisions, and it is compelling IT leaders and support teams to become influencers in their business and partners with the business. Some of the other key challenges when you look at mainframe performance analysis tools specifically is that the configuration of reports often is complex and requires very specific high levels of mainframe expertise. And then there's often a significant delay between the generation of the SMF records, so the events that prompt the production of the SMF records and the actual update of the MPA tool when data is available, information is available, or even specific reports are available. And then the production of reports and dashboards consumes a significant amount of mainframe resources. So this is everything from actual consuming MSU to do the processing, all the way to actually skilled resources when specific types of reports are needed and requested to go in and make those customizations and create those customized reports for specific needs. Now I'd like to talk a little bit more specifically about Ztrim Operations Analytics by RSD. So there are really several factors that RSD focused on in this offering. So first of all, we see Ztrim Operations Analytics as a communication tool. Really, it is the means to facilitate communication between technical and non-technical stakeholders throughout the business through an easy-to-use and interactive web interface. And we wanted to make it interactive. It's actually interactive with KPI data already integrated. These are common KPI metrics that are already integrated into the product so that you can review, track processing, and do in-depth analysis for collaborative decision-making across the organization with various stakeholders, including IT and the business units. Then planning and cost control. You can understand and expose mainframe resource consumption for proactive responses to strategic planning without contributing to additional MSU consumption. We're doing the processing off-platform, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. In addition, Ztrim Operations Analytics was actually created for all users, and by that we mean that not only mainframe experts, but it's a graphical visualization tool, so it is a web interface where you can interact with the data the way people are used to interacting with data today in other applications that are web-based. It's scalable. We're using open source Elasticsearch as the repository, and it's capable of providing live analytics on an unlimited volume of data. I like to tell a little story about Elasticsearch at this point. If you're not familiar with Elasticsearch, it is a distributed open source search engine that provides real-time analytics. It's based on Lucene, Logstash, and the Kibana, so the ELK stack, if you've heard of that. In addition, there's an interesting YouTube video that you can access about that talks about the scalability of Elasticsearch. It's a YouTube video that was held at a conference, and the presenter is a gentleman named Bhaskar Karambekar. He is a Verizon director at Verizon, and they've used Elasticsearch to create a repository that they use for their business consumer network. And just what they're doing is they're tracking security on those individual business security networks. And they've built an Elasticsearch repository with over 650 billion documents in it. It's a really compelling video. I would encourage you to go out and kind of check it out. He does a great job of presenting not only Elasticsearch, but some of the challenges that they face and how they address those challenges. It is a very compelling story about using Elasticsearch in this way. And then finally, easy and affordable. One of the things that RSD focused on is how can we make Ztrim operations analytics easy to implement and easy to afford. So this is an overview of the architecture of Ztrim operations analytics. SMF data is collected at desired intervals and transmitted to the distributed environment. So what we're doing is exploiting SMF that's already readily available on the ZOS system. The extraction, processing, and grouping of records is actually handled on the distributed system using those standard SMF records and then creating output file formats. This configuration eliminates any MSU processing for the grouping of the records. The resulting data populates Elasticsearch, and as I mentioned, Elasticsearch is a distributed open source search engine. Ztrim also has SQL and SQL compatibility module to provide the base metrics for other business reporting, and we would certainly be interested in learning what your business might need regarding any custom SQL requirements you might have for current reporting. And then there is a Ztrim web user interface. So this is a completely, when you're looking at that Linux environment, this is some completely self-contained package, and the web interface is available so that users can basically use any browser that they want to access Ztrim operations analytics dashboards. So there are some basic questions that IT, business, and system decision makers need answered. What is running on my mainframe? What is the resource impact of each application? And can consumption be reduced by optimizing a specific activity to free up budget and funding for modernization initiatives? So here I want to look at really quickly Operations Analytics version 1, and we really focus on R4H analysis. So as I mentioned before, we have specific KPIs that are known and common standard KPI metrics that provide R4H profile analysis and detailed MSU consumption based on capacity and applications, programs, workloads. And then we also have the capability to create a dashboard that will track and report on your batch window cutoff so that you can track meeting your SLAs. There are corresponding tables that are available, and then as we've mentioned before, and Mark will clearly demonstrate this, where you can create meaningful customized dashboards for individual stakeholders. It's very dynamic, and even within each dashboard, these stakeholders can interact with the data live. And then also there's sharing and subscription capabilities. So what we mean by that is if you're looking at a view of a dashboard and you see something that is significant that you want to have a discussion right away with somebody, you can actually send them a link, and when they click on it, it will open up, and you'll be able to have a meaningful conversation with them about that particular data. But you can also create dashboards and have members or people across your organization subscribe to those dashboards, and as dashboards update, it will send them an automatic email notification. When they click on the link in the email, it would actually open up the current dashboard for them. We have dynamic navigation and simulation capabilities within the product, kind of what I've been talking about, where you can interact live with the data. multiple filters where you can look at the data and information in various ways and drill down into various views of the information. We are using SMF 30, 70, and 72 records. And the model that we're proposing for customers is that they can collect the data hourly, and that it would be actually ingested and processed as soon as every 90 minutes, depending on how you set up your transfer of data to your Ztrim operations analytics environment. And then again, a key component is the fact that we're not consuming and contributing to MSU consumption, when obviously the goal is for optimization on that platform. So you don't want to introduce things that are going to consume additional MSU. And now for the exciting part. We actually get into the product demo. We're always excited to do that. So Mark, I turn it over to you.
And I'm off of mute. And hello, everyone. This is Mark Perlow. I work with Craig at RSD. I'm also a technical account manager. And we're going to do a live demo with a Ztrim environment that I'm running on my laptop in a Linux virtual machine. We'll be accessing it through the browser. And if you bear with me for just a second, I'm going to move that window. Hopefully this will work.
Yep, looks good.
And we are now looking at, okay, one of the dashboards. I'm going to go back. We talked about creating specific dashboards for specific purposes before. We're at the main menu right now for Ztrim. By default, this particular dashboard comes up with yesterday's activity by default. And what it does is it pulls up what we think would be appropriate for maybe an operations manager. Is featuring the cutoff compliance, and we're seeing that one of the backups did not end within the batch window, is highlighted in red. These scheduling parameters for each one of the LPARs in the Sysplex are available in settings. We'll see that in a little while. In addition to that initial EFF30 KPI that we were looking at, they also bundled in a rolling 4-hour analysis by workload type for the previous day and by program category. We're going to go through all these different categories later. The one thing I just wanted to mention at this point at a very high level is that these aren't static images that are being shown. This is a live KPI, and any one of these selections changes the display and highlights the activity that would be affected by either selecting a workload or excluding it. And we'll get to that later. So this is an example of a default dashboard you may set up for one of your people. A quick view of yesterday's activities.
Yeah, and Mark, I think it's noteworthy here too that what you've done with this dashboard is you've really focused on the R4H, but you've looked at it from different perspectives.
Yeah.
So I think it's a good point that perhaps an operations manager or a mid-level IT manager or leader, this is something that they would be interested in, right? To see that daily, early morning view of kind of what's been going on. And you can, if you notice, you can see by workload, program, applications. So there are various, and then the overall, I think at the bottom you had maybe the overall, or was that by the application?
Yeah, just
the R4H peaks for the time. You notice that this is all reflective, basically, of pretty much the same time period with that R4H peak kind of doing the trend over time. So this would be a really good synopsis of, hey, what's going on day to day, but then at the same time, a real quick view of some trends as well.
Right, and one of the things I'm going to note here to keep us honest with the R4H peaks is you see that it goes all the way out to Monday, October 1st.
We're predicting the future.
we're not time traveling because this is demo data that we use throughout the year for the product. We have data out there through the end of December just so we can pick any any time period, any parameter. Some of these KPIs are expected to go over 13 months. So there's a year's worth of data out here, some of which will actually seem like it's in the future. Okay, well, that's the person who has a very organized focus. Then you get geeks like me that just want to play with all the toys. So for geeks like me, we've got the shared demo dashboard. I'm not going to save any. The few clicks that we did were saved. We're not going to go there. And what I did is I took the KPIs I thought most people would use, focusing initially on the rolling 4-hour average, and put them in order. They get more complex the further you go. At the very end are summaries. And just show how easy the product is to use. Any one of these can be selected, and we can show you how you can drill down. The very, very first KPI here, the cost 10, and I'm going to zoom so we can just get it in its entirety. In this one KPI, you can see almost all the tools that are available in the product. Initially, you can go in and filter. You may want to look at a specific Sysplex, a specific box. You may want to look at production versus test as you have it defined in your environment, or a particular LPAR. We have a lot of LPARs here. I'm not too keen on that display, but we can take test out of the mix and see that production is our biggest contributor to the workload. Or to go the other way, we can select backwards. And you can see the test is definitely a smaller contributor. But what's interesting is that test and productions follow the same flow of consumption throughout the day. So you don't have test periods that are happening when production isn't. The workload is pretty consistent across both environments.
What might be, yeah, and one of the things, Mark, that might be compelling about that is that what you would have expected to see in your environment, right?
Yeah, it's
is it right? Maybe so, but should your test, I mean, you can ask lots of questions at this point, right?
Right.
Should your test environment actually reflect exactly what's going on in production?
Well, this is when I get excited when we get real data, because this stuff
Right.
is, it's pretty homogenized. A lot of the values are pretty equal. There's equal contributors. All the charts kind of reflect uniformity. You get into an environment, you see spikes and workloads that people don't even realize are running. And it really gives you a perspective on how much people can learn about their environments. They went crazy with the number of LPARs, so I'm not even going to go there. There are some graphs where you see the LPAR usage. But it's interesting. And for most purposes in this particular KPI, just having the whole system, because that's how you're ultimately getting charged for your licensing, is pretty straightforward. Okay. Now I wanted to just talk a little bit about, we talk about consumption by workloads, we talk about consumption by applications. The workload types are actually from Workload Manager. So you have like 3 basic breakdowns. You've got batch, teleprocessing, and your database processing. This second KPI, the cost 11, shows that. I tried to get some colors so you can get a good contrast here. What I find interesting is that when you start playing with the numbers on this, batch is the largest contributor in the system. Further down, we'll see some pie charts to talk about that. But the onlines are the ones that actually drive the rolling 4-hour average. And that's because a certain amount of batch has to be running for this to happen. One thing I found particularly interesting was that the DB2, the database usage, isn't that significant. A lot of times we'll see DB2 workloads that happen just before or just after online processing. And this one, that's not the case. It's actually a little busier during the daytime. Craig, do you have any input on this guy? I think he's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that it follows the same peak. And certainly,
I mean, going back to the KPI, in this particular KPI where you can actually include or exclude workloads, if we take teleprocessing out of the mix, what will happen, and I'm sorry, I apologize, I should have this full screen. It's my bad. Take teleprocessing out of the mix, it makes a big difference in the rolling 4-hour average. Unfortunately, that's probably where most of your business is being done.
Right.
So that savings, that simulated savings of 200 MSUs, the overall, the R4H saving and the MSU savings, probably not reality. But once you start selecting workloads, you get the ability to flip. So in this case, you would only see the teleprocessing, exclude the other two. Or if you've gotten to the point where you have a lot of selection, you just want to get back and see how everything works again, we're back again. One of the things I think is kind of funny is if you notice on the very, very top here, I'll go back so you can see it. On the top title bar, up on the right, maybe I can get my mouse there. We are using the Europe Paris time. And that's because that's when this was actually done in Europe. You notice the online activity pretty much follows what an online day would be. It starts up around 7 in the morning, finishes at 7 in the evening. If we put it to our time zone, I'm in the eastern U.S., the data wouldn't make a lot of sense. So that's kind of why we're on European time for this demo. Okay, this next KPI, which is our cost 12, this is the one where I probably spend a lot of my time. I really like this one. And at this point, if you notice the actual programs that are being noted, I just wanted to make it's an opportunity to quickly switch. I won't do this often, I promise. This is program category, workload program. Go back. You see all these different applications on the left. They're actually defined in the top programs, which is another KPI that we'll be looking at. But it gives you a profile of those programs, and it allows you to group them together, which is huge. If you just went for every individual program that was running, you'd have a pretty substantial list. And a lot of times you've got products like our EOS products that are more than one program that are running, but they're all contributors to what you see on the right here is EOS batch. So by making our program categories, we can give a nice view of what processing is on our system here in the cost 12. All the colors map is nice and pretty, and now you can say, wow, DB2 isn't really a big workload. It's actually easier to see if we flip it here. It's this little yellow bar. But it does align with the online day. And we can also say EOS viewing is not significant, but it also occurs during the peak for the online day.
Yeah, and I think, Mark, what is interesting about this, and you and I have both have experienced this in working with customers and showing them their data, sampling of their data, where they undertaken initiatives or they're actually in the process of a project. And when they start looking at some of the view of especially program category, and they are talking about a particular optimization initiative, and then when they see this data, they're like, oh, that's actually a small segment of our overall processing. Is that an optimization project we probably shouldn't have pursued? And they're like, well, it might not bring you, it's maybe not necessarily something that you should not have pursued, but the value as far as pursuing it, as far as ROI is concerned, it may have been better served, put off or being less high priority. So we both had that conversation, right? Yeah. So
for example,
this is an example of that. Yeah. Right.
If they came and said, we're going to spend a lot of time and really optimize DB2,
right? I
would say that's not really a lot of return or bang for the buck there.
Right.
You might be better served. There's this program, this BFDI. I'm not exactly sure what it is in our sample data. But to me, this would be a guy where I might want to spend more time. It's a big resource consumer. If it weren't for the onlines, it would probably be one of the biggest single contributors. Even when the onlines are up, it's still contributing a fair amount. Maybe revamping when that's run and changing some stuff around, that may actually have an impact on the rolling 4-hour average that will save you some money. But if we put it here, it should be, significant savings compared to doing the DB2. Yeah, it's once you actually have data and metrics to look at, a lot of assumptions go away, and you're actually working with you know, something that will give you a meaningful result just by running these simulations. Because all the data is there, you just need the opportunity to get them into a format where you can understand what it's saying.
Right.
And one of the things that we have in this slide, just to emphasize utilization for a tool, is the TDSZ, the Tivoli solution from IBM. Even though they've done a pretty good job of keeping it out of the online hours, it's still contributing to the rolling 4-hour average. These big peaks that are coming up.
Yeah, especially in that ramp up of the online day.
Yeah. At
So,
8 a.m., 7 a.m., 8 a.m., it's a big contributor. If that were moved or maybe broken down into finer pieces so it can run longer during a batch cycle, that might help.
right.
But
Right.
with like
So, yeah, it gives you an opportunity to focus on, well, what are we really doing in that 6, 7, and 8 a.m. time frame? And could it be spread out? You know, do we actually have to do all of that processing within that window, or can we spread it out a little bit so that it's a longer window? I mean, just imagine if you were to spread that out all the way to 10 a.m. perhaps, and then that line go down, it would certainly, because it's it's a predecessor to that peak right there, right? That red line.
right, it's going
So
to help.
yeah, you can lower that, then you would assume that that peak would go down as well.
And here's the result of what Craig just said. And additionally, is excluded here. If you get Ztrim, that workload wouldn't be there. It would be reflected by this. So there would be a rolling 4-hour average savings, assuming you can get all the processing you needed to from the Ztrim operations analytics. If there's very in-depth and involved processing in TDSZ that involves mainframe cycles, and you still need to run pieces of that, you may not be able to get rid of it entirely. So these two KPIs kind of complement each other. And if we look, and these are the ones where I would spend most of the time. Spend all the time coming up with your program categories, putting together things that make sense. A good example of a program category that I found is there are a lot of CA monitors out there that a given monitor for, say, DB2 or Kix might have 6 or 7 components. Combine those things, maybe only account for 1 or 2% of the processing on the CPU. Putting them all together just makes life a lot easier. It's a good use for this tool. And this is one that I use a lot. This is where I spend a lot of my time, being on the geeky side. As opposed to the actual programs, I also have a dashboard that talks about the consumers. These would be like your batch jobs that are running, your and the utilization that they have now. When I was talking before about our demo data, notice how nice and even. Nothing is more than 11%, nothing is less than 9%. If we look in the these top consumers, look how nice these pie charts are. The top 10 all fit in. You know, the top 20, they come down to 5. This never happens in real life. You always have big guys. You have little guys that like 10 or 20 of them might contribute to 1%. But it makes lousy dashboards to look at. These pie charts are lovely. So this simulated data is a beautiful thing.
Well, and the other thing about it is, too, I mean, if you were looking at a daily view of that, you would certainly, one of the things that it would give you the opportunity to do is see any anomalies, right? Like if you were used to seeing this pie chart look like this, and then all of a sudden you saw something that was 18%, it's like, wait, what happened? Yeah. Did we change something? Did we move something? Did we, you know, was there an update to an application? So it prompts some questions and some discussion, or is it just an anomaly? And then, you know, it's something that you either need to address, or it's something that's an opportunity to say, hey, do we have the exception capability? We put in this process, and for the first few days, you know, it created this anomaly as far as how it processed, right? All these peaks that are not normal, and then it calmed down, whatever the situation might be. You have an exception process with your license, right? So that if you can substantiate that event, you can put it into your monthly submission, right, for your MLC and say, this was an anomaly, we need this deducted. So it gives you an opportunity to see those kinds of trends as well and be on top of them right away.
Also, in this particular case, we're using the job prefixes to just come up with an application prefix. Traditionally, in the mainframe world, most people use prefixes. They have 8 characters to work with. Usually the first 1 through 4 are meaningful, show ownership, etc. But this application mapping, these titles are totally configurable by you. It's probably a good time just to show that. If we go to settings, and this is for all dashboards, we've been in dashboards the whole time. If we go back up to the actual Ztrim settings themselves, it's kind of hard to see because it's like gray and white. But if we go to mappings, okay, we saw originally that we had production and test defined. Those are defined by LPAR. The colors, I tried. There's some colors that are still kind of close. They can all be done here so they contrast well. The program category, which I think is key, notice that you not only can pick out a category name, you can have programs eliminated by a comma. You can have a program prefix with a wildcard. And that gives you a lot of flexibility and control. And like I said, it gives you a meaningful category. You don't want to have 50 categories out there and have a graph where you have to keep selecting every little thing to find something. The actual CPC, there's 2 boxes. That's nothing too interesting. But the applications, this is where I was saying that if you knew that, say, all ICSTs were some teleprocessing application, you could put a meaningful name in here for the application. And you may pick out specific jobs that you know are big monthly or daily runs that should be highlighted and use very specific resources. You can do that categorization here, and it'll go through all the KPIs. Once this is saved, it's reflected. So any change here will go back, it's automatically updated next time you go to a KPI. And last night when I was playing with the colors, I was going back and forth for like an hour. It was driving me crazy. And you'll see. I'll show you some of the colors I don't like. Is there anything else? Craig talked about
The subscription, yeah.
Being able to select the dashboard and say when it changes to send it to somebody. That's here. There's some dashboard settings here. It's mostly about the display. Which one is the default? Your formatting for, you know, how you want to do your time, your date, whether you want to use a US or a European style. There's a lot of basic presentation customization. The settings are just for the environment. I don't think I actually have an ingester that was run.
Yeah, we load the data separately.
It was already provided. Yeah.
Well, this is a nice tool as well, though, where you can see exactly, you know, that activity as far as when you've ingested data and the dates and the processing is specific. And so it does keep a nice log here for you to actually
make sure you got
to make sure you,
every day, you know.
Right.
How long it took. I'm going to go back to the demo dashboard at this point. Sure. Demo.
We probably just have a couple more minutes to allow for
yeah, we want to be able to have questions. So this is basically the product. I can spend another hour just going through.
Go back down to that usage by 13 months. I kind of like that view sometimes.
Oh, I think this would be wacky. Yeah. Let's blow him up. Sometimes the graph looks really nice. It's just a solid bar. This one is actually looking at a specific time period. It says usage for the past 13 months, but if you actually look at the analyze here, we can do this by LPAR, and it's totally useless. But unless you decide I just want to see what's running on production.
Right, but you can also expand that time range easily, right? And
right.
That's one of the things that's kind of nice, right?
Yeah, these are the different, we can say year to date. And it starts to smooth out. And we can go back to...
But you can see that you can adjust it within that 15 months. And if you want, you could actually start with, a true 13-month trend and then break it down and see what the true trends are.
Or you could go by hour, and it starts getting kind of jagged, and the hours overlap on the time bar,
Yeah.
But yeah, I tend to like just the Sysplex view. But by the same token, go back to a more realistic period here, back to day. A lot of these almost look, I think the best use for them is to be a static report like on yesterday's activity, just have something like this to look at. The same with the peaks. When you start breaking it down, you kind of lose the effect. We're looking at a peak, you're looking at MSU usage. Those are nice at a summary view. Usually the KPIs, when you copy them, the default is usually the one you're going to use the most. Like like analysis by workload type here, or program category. You really want to see the programs running. You could analyze it by LPAR, but then you don't see the programs, you just see the utilization on the LPAR. So it's sort of like, well,
sure, but on this one, a good analysis might be by the CPC or the Sysplex, depending on what you've got configured, right? And then is it as expected?
It's like I look at it thinking about the programs that are contributed, but somebody else may be just worried about LPAR capacity utilization. So Craig's right. So I'm putting my preferences forward, but a lot of people may look at this and say, I can do a summary report every week and have a dashboard just for that. And yeah, you would definitely be using different analysis for that.
Right. Or maybe I'm looking at the data to gather some information about what I need to do as far as planning for my infrastructure, right? Am I looking at a new processor or whatever, and what do I need to look at? Do I need to look at a processor with more memory? Do I need to look at a processor? So there are some factors that you can look at the data in different ways and draw some conclusions for other projects and processes. So there's really a variety of things that you can do as you go into the data and look at it in different views.
I'm just going to, I think, finish it up with these two, because a lot of times you get a guy who likes to see a pie chart. Usually a high-level manager just wants like a single visualization of how are my resources doing? Where's all my processing being spent? What does it really look like? And that's what I think of for these summaries for both mainframe, profile, and contributors. Sure. And this is where I kept trying to come up with good colors, because this one has 3 different blues. And for a while, you couldn't tell the difference between the database and the teleprocessing. You had to keep changing and excluding stuff. But, a minor complaint. Because when you apply the colors, you have to see how they work with everything they may get involved with. So you can accidentally make something invisible. And these other breakdowns may be great for application areas. They give you a pie chart of the consumption that we talked about before and the top programs. And this reflects all the mapping that's done. In the mappings and settings that we do, you can also do them here. If there's an area here that says add map, you could just click it and you go directly to it. I've got them all defined here so we wouldn't have other as a huge category, which is the way you would start.
Yeah, so we can see that there are compelling ways to interact with the data and compelling ways to present the data as well to individual, customized to, what are the needs, what are the stakeholders, what is the stakeholder interested in? Is it a leader in IT? Is it somebody in the business is looking for something? Is it somebody that's been made responsible for some particular optimization initiatives and they need data? You create a dashboard and sit down with them and say, okay, let's talk about this and let's look at this data together. And it's more meaningful. It's really what we talked about before was a communication tool. And frankly, the most compelling demo, we can show you a demo of this anonymized data. But the most compelling data is what we're doing today is asking customers, hey, give us a sampling of your data. Identify your R4H peak and give us the 3 to 4 days surrounding that peak. Sampling of your SMF data, so it's the type SMF 30, 70, and 72 records. And we'll pull those in and show you a demo using your data. Yeah. And, let's talk together and, just have a conversation and see what conclusions you draw from seeing your data interactively in this way.
And you learn a lot. Okay. I'm seeing time-wise, Craig, that we're probably going to have to get some time in here for questions.
Yep.
I'm going to
Thanks, Mark.
Minimize this. We're back to the presentation. Is there anything else you wanted to cover here, Craig?
I think there's one more, maybe 1 or 2 slides, but I think we talked about the fact that what we're really targeting is, the ask is, if you're interested, reach out and let's have a discussion about you providing your SMF records so that we can show the demo using your records. And then I guess we open it up for other questions. So Casey, kind of back to you.
All right. So we have a couple questions. The first one, how long does it take to install this solution?
So we have, it's basically a package. And what we say today is that if you have already a method that you're pulling your SMF records, whether you're using the man files or a log stream, once you have that in place and then the capability to transfer it down to that distributed server, wherever you're running that, you can install Ztrim Operations Analytics in 1 day once you have those things in place.
All right. Another question, does the tool run on ZLinux?
Oh, I don't like that question. Okay, so this is my standard answer. Yes, Ztrim Operations Analytics will run on ZLinux. However, Elasticsearch is not currently supported on ZLinux. We are aware of installations where people are running Elasticsearch on ZLinux, but as an official stance today, Elasticsearch does not provide support on ZLinux. That may happen in the future. We have been working with them and asking them to provide that. We'll see what happens. But that's really the only, that's kind of the roadblock at the moment for it to run on ZLinux.
This is Mark Perlow. Just to add to that, we do have a requirement in the Open Mainframe project through Len Santalucia that's going up to Elasticsearch as we speak to get at least minimal support
Right.
in that space, and maybe get some help from the vendor community as well.
Yeah,
so.
We were able to have that conversation recently. So there is support and there is attention for that. It's just not there yet. So it's not something that we can...
Yeah.
We're comfortable recommending because you would not have support for your Elasticsearch installation.
Off the record, you can Google how to do it, and it works, but it's not officially supported.
Yeah, and it does work. We have
Yep.
seen instances where people are obviously doing it. But
Okay.
All right. How long before I can start getting reports?
So actually, once you have the product installed, what Mark was showing, Mark, do you want to just add, let's just do it right now, just show them, just create a new dashboard. Go up there and say, I want a new dashboard, and right.
And add a KPI.
Add a KPI.
We'll make this one the Americas. Okay, let's call it new. Name doesn't matter. So once you have the product installed, you can create your dashboard, and you don't have any KPIs. Imagine that. Well, let's add some. And this is the standard set of KPIs that we reviewed.
They're already built, right?
So this is a very straightforward one. That was the cost 10. We don't, at this point,
You can name it whatever you want.
we can always edit the titles and the comments later.
Right.
But by default, here's your dashboard. And like I was saying, by default, when you install a KPI, the default analyze on this one is just the total. But if you really are a CPC or Sysplex person, you can put it here, save it, and that's your default. It normally goes by hour. Usually you're doing the rolling 4-hour average. You want the daily view, but the hourly view. But you can go to a daily view. You end up with a very silly looking bar chart.
So the point, once you have the product installed and you have some
Sure.
universe of SMF records, you just saw us build one. Yeah, the reports are there.
You can go in right away. Yeah, let's go back to hour. There we go. Now it looks real. Yep. So that's our first KPI.
Then
Now
you can
you can make this window bigger.
And you can drag that around.
Scroll it down. You can drag it around in the window, put stuff in different orders. I mean, it's pretty customizable. But make your changes. You have a new dashboard. You have one KPI in it. So you can go to the right here. It's actually not an effective change. You can save or discard them. So now we have a new dashboard. And it's saved.
And you can
And this one is
continue
using
to add
American
KPIs. Yeah,
time
continue
zone.
to add KPIs as needed.
And now if you do the online, the times don't make any sense because you're using a U.S. time zone on data that came from Europe. So that's what I hit
Well, it's just a
yesterday.
little bit wonky for what you'd think of as normal business model.
For your shop.
Are there any other questions?
Yes, another question. What is your plan to extend your SMF records coverage?
So we do have a plan. We have some specifics that we're working on today. I know that we're working we have some specific requests for CICS records. That's one that we're intently working on now. This is the newest version that we just showed today. So we added some capabilities associated with WLM, like Mark mentioned earlier. But if you have specific needs and specific interests, we would be very interested in hearing that and hearing what KPIs, maybe if you already have something in use, and entertaining that and seeing if we can't get it in our roadmap.
And this is Mark again. I know that the end of the year, I think it's release 1.2 that's coming out. We're actually going to have the WLM reporting classes and KPIs.
Right.
You know, a lot of people do chargeback and performance summaries using that information, so it'll be available in KPIs as well. That was a big customer request from one of the U.S. customers.
And Mark and I were able to attend several sessions associated with SMF that's shared this year. And I think we came away with our own opinions. So we're lobbying. Lobbying for some specific records as well. So it's something that we would certainly entertain.
There are some really nice fields in the SMF 113s with machine characteristics that can be used for analytics that a lot of the vendors are looking at, and we'll probably be looking at as well.
Right.
Okay, and one more question. What is the price of Ztrim Operations Analytics, and what is included in this pricing?
So Ztrim Operation Analytics, and do we have Jim Guthrie and John Scagnelli online? I don't know if one of you wants to speak to that.
Yeah, John Scagnelli's here.
Hey, John.
Okay, John.
Hey. So the question was pricing. So the way we price the product, it's a subscription price. It's a 3-year contract, and it's $30,000 per year.
Per CPC.
Per CPC, right? Per CPC. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And everything that you saw today is included in the price.
Along with the support.
Yep. So if you have a huge box with 50 LPARs, it's $30,000 a year. If you have a little box with 2 LPARs, it's $30,000 a year. So, especially if you're a large enterprise owner, this is a very attractively priced product.
Right.
All right.
Well, in comparison to some of the volume pricing, where
Today,
that's in place today, where you have to have companion products,
right.
And then also at least one of those products is typically based on the charges for that product is based on the consumption, right, of the amount of data that you're storing.
For example,
based, right?
IBM has a family of products that provide similar functionality, but to buy into that whole environment, there are products that have solutions that are volume-based. So if you have a large repository, you're paying a premium in the licensing for it. Plus, you're going across many platforms and maybe also incurring some MSUs in the mainframe. So a lot of these hybrid solutions that are going across multiple environments, you end up getting a little bit of a kind of charge in each one. It's just the nature of the beast.
Okay, well, that concludes today's webcast. We'd like to thank everyone, especially Craig Hilburn and Mark Perillo and the RSD team for attending the event today. This feature will soon be available on the SHARE website at share.org, and there is a survey after the webinar for you to complete. We thank you in advance for your feedback. Thank you again for attending today's webinar, and have a great day.
Thanks, Casey.
Thanks, Casey.